pick that up in just a moment. Good morning, everyone. Today we are celebrating our Stewardship Sunday as well as the last week in our message series, Where Do We Grow From Here? If you've been with us through the course of the whole series, or if you're just joining us for today, I want to say thank you for coming along for the ride. The basic point of the whole series is this: you can grow wherever God puts you, whether things are going well or not so well. And sometimes it happens that the most difficult seasons in which we live are the times when we experience the greatest growth. To recap, in the first week, we talked about service. We talked about how others serve you and how you serve others. We said that the important question that a disciple asks is not, what do I get? But rather, what can I give? In the second week, we talked about trust. And we said that trusting in Jesus should lead us to prayer. In the third week, Deacon Nick preached about love. And he said that when we know God's unconditional love, we can reflect it to others. Last week, we talked about generosity. And we said that we want everyone to be generous because being generous makes you happier and more like God. And we said that the key to measuring generosity is not how much you give, but rather how much it costs you. And we said that you can be generous with your money, but you don't need money to be generous, because it's also important to be generous with your time, your patience, your love, and more. Also, over the past weeks, we've talked about how giving to our parish is an act of worship and an expression of faith. We've invited the people who consider themselves members of our Ascension parish family to make a faith commitment to the offertory over the course of the coming year. For those of you who've made a faith commitment in the form of a non-binding pledge, I want to say thank you. In a few moments, we will receive those faith offerings and we will place them here on the altar. And as we do that, we're going to pray over them and we're going to ask God's blessings on all of the families who've chosen to invest in our parish in this way. Today, we are diving into the seed of growth called vision. When you look at this glass of water, this was a prop, not for you to drink. Occupational hazard. When you look at this glass of water, is it half empty or half full? Half full. Very good. Because for a Christian, the only answer is half full. I was going to take a sip of it, but not anymore. Yeah, that question is often a litmus test for whether a person's personality type and whether they see the world positively or negatively. But regardless of how you might naturally answer that question, the only answer to that question has to be, for a Christian, half full. Half full because Jesus suffered and died on the cross, but that wasn't the end of the story. Easter Sunday followed resurrection time, so the victory has been won. We have to see things positively. In a little while, we're going to profess the words of the Creed. And since those words are true, the victory's been won. We have to see things positively. The simple truth is this: the resurrection of Jesus proves that the victory has been won. Sure, there are still battles to be fought. There are still crosses that we have to carry. And there is still sometimes uncertainty in the present. But beyond all of that is ultimate victory. Because Jesus' victory is our victory. Now, it's true, sometimes knowing that up here is not the same thing with how we live, think, speak, and act on a day-to-day basis. For instance, have you ever laid in bed awake at night worrying about something that you can't control? Or have you ever fallen into that despair which stems from a cynical view of yourself, others, or anything else? When life is hard, sometimes we can lose sight of this victory. And sometimes when life is hard, we can wonder, is everything that we do, is it worth it? Is it worth the effort? To see and to appreciate this bigger picture, I think we can take a lesson from honeybees. Now, in the nest, in the hive, there are all sorts of bees. But it's the worker bees who leave the hive and go from flower to flower, collecting the nectar that they use to make honey. Now, on a busy day, a honeybee might leave the nest, the hive rather, up to 15 times. And on each of these trips, that honeybee might travel 1 or 2 miles, going from flower to flower, collecting nectar. That could be like 30 miles for a little bee. And I struggle just to get 10,000 steps in a day. Okay. How much honey do you think that bee who does all of that work is responsible for making? So maybe 30 miles a day on the high end, lives for 5 or 6 weeks. You can do the math. Hundreds of thousands of flowers. How much honey? A teaspoon. Anything else? 1/12 of a teaspoon. So that's the closest yet, though. 1/12 of a teaspoon. It seems like a lot of work for so little. And maybe you've asked yourself the same question. With everything you have to do, and sometimes it seems like the output is so small, is it worth the effort? Cleaning the house, cooking dinner, raising kids, that project at work, or all this effort sometimes we put into programs at church, and then so few people come. So often we do so much, but the results seem so small. But here's the important point with the honeybees, and I think it's the perspective that we need to have with everything that we do. The honey that the bees produce may not be much on its own, but honeybees are responsible for pollinating up to 80% of all flowering plants. Now think of what life would be like now without honeybees. And so also, I think that's true for you. Everything that you do is for you, but it's for so much more than you. And everything that our parish does is for our parish, but it's for so much more than the people here. If you'll indulge me to stick with the analogy, all of us are honeybees in our families, in our community, and beyond. As disciples of Jesus, we carry his teaching and his grace to everything that we touch, hopefully giving this joyful optimism that results from the resurrection, and then seeing that glass half full. When we get to heaven, and then we look back on our life, I think we are going to be shocked, in a good way, and astounded at the impact that all of our good actions, prayers, words, and deeds had. We're going to be looked back and we're going to be blown away, because sometimes it feels like we just have that 1/12 of a teaspoon, but then we're going to see the 80% of everything else that resulted from that. At Mass, sometimes I like to say, welcome if you're here for the first time or the first time in a long time. We're glad you're here. And then maybe a month or two ago, after Mass, a little boy came up to me and he said, "Hey, Father, today was our first time in a long time." And then his mother looked a little embarrassed. And I just smiled and I said, "And we're glad you're here." That's what our parish does. I mean, think of this. That little one, touched by God's grace, and we cannot quantify the impact that he's going to have in his family, in his classroom at school, in his sports team, in his career, and then everything that moves on from that. I don't mean to be too big, but that is the work of our parish. That's what we do. Now let's take a look at today's gospel. In today's gospel, Jesus is preaching in the Jerusalem temple, and if we look at the chronology, we are on Monday or Tuesday of Holy Week, so it's just a few days before Jesus is going to die on the cross. And while Jesus does talk about the challenges that are ahead, and he's thinking more about our challenges, that's not the focus. The focus of what Jesus is teaching is that he is always in control, no matter how bad things look. Even, as we read, in those days when the sun is darkened, the moon does not give its light, and when the stars fall from the sky. That's an analogy for the end times. But also, that's how our lives feel sometimes when things aren't going well. Especially when we experience painful, life-changing events, like the end of a relationship, the loss of a job, a cancer diagnosis, the death of a loved one, or anything else. But it's in these times that we should recall the words of the 23rd Psalm. "The Lord is my shepherd, there is nothing I shall want. Through the dark valley," embarrassing. "Even though I walk through the dark valley, I will fear no evil, for you are at my side. With your rod and your staff, that give me courage." It's not always easy to see, but God's hand is in everything. Everything we experience, for good or for ill. Even though that we know that Jesus is Lord, we can fall into that half-empty way of thinking that keeps us from seeing all of the amazing things that God is doing in ourselves, in our parish, and all the things that God is capable of and is planning to do. Some of you remember Father Gabriel, who lived in the rectory with me. He moved on to continue his studies a few years ago. But one time I was having a difficulty with somebody, and I turned to Father Gabriel for wisdom, because he could always give it. And I described to him the situation. I was struggling, and he said, "Why don't you try this?" He said, "Why don't you say to that person, 'I'm having difficulty seeing things as you see them. Help me see them as you see them.'" So I went to this person, and it was like a breakthrough. I said to them, "I'm having difficulty seeing things as you see them. Can you help me see them as you see them?" And it was like a light switch was flicked, and we had a breakthrough. The reason we had that breakthrough is because asking that question expanded my vision. And in a way, that is the job of our parish. Our parish needs to help people see things as God sees them. To help people see things as God sees them. And that is always half full. At this time, I want to invite forward a few of the people who are on the front line of making this happen in our parish. These people and a few others, they are the members of your Ascension parish staff. On this Stewardship Sunday, it's true, your giving makes their work possible, and we pay them, but but they put their faith and their hearts into everything that they do. And I can say this for them. The work that they do, whatever it is a labor of love. A labor of love for you. So, would you all join me for a moment in praying for them? If you're comfortable, would you raise one of your hands, raise a hand over them. We're going to pray over them together. Lord, bless these staff members who serve on our team, who help us along the path to a better life through Jesus Christ. Lord, bless their efforts for us and help our parish to become a growing community of faith where everyone feels at home. And give us that joyful optimism so that we can see things as you see them and help others to see them that way too. Through Christ our Lord.